Welcome, dear followers, and thank you for supporting us so that we can continue and provide you with new interesting videos and real facts. Our story today is interesting and very strange. The events of this story took place on the 22nd day of August of the year 1922, when the neighbors heard the sound of gunfire in a palace luxurious. They rushed to the shooting area, entered the palace, and found a state of chaos prevailing in the house, and found the owner of the palace murdered on the ground, with 3 bullets beside him. Here we will know what happened with the investigations and how the police were able to find out the truth 10 years after the accident occurred. Had it not been for the incident being documented at the time, people would have believed that the story is a fictional movie and not from reality. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, press the bell, and like the video so that we can continue and provide you with similar and more exciting videos. After the police arrived at the crime scene, and when they saw the murdered body on the ground, they began to search the house. During the search, they heard a screaming sound coming from the second floor of the house. The police rushed to the location of the sound directly, and then they realized that the sound was of a woman coming from a closed closet inside one of the bedrooms, and they started asking her about her name and what she did inside the locker. And in a trembling voice full of fear, she told them that her name was Sophie and asked them to take her out from inside the locker because fear filled her. One of the policemen tried to open the locker, but it was tightly closed. When they asked her for the location of the locker key, she informed them that she did not know where it was because a stranger had locked it and gone, and in the meantime one of the inspectors came carrying a key in his hand that he had found in the next room. He put the key in the door and opened the safe. They took it out, and they began to ask her why she was locked inside the closet. She said, "I went up to my room and left my husband John sitting downstairs and opened the closet to change my clothes, and suddenly I heard screams and gunfire, and at the same moment someone pushed me inside the closet and closed the door." Through investigations and inventorying the assets of the house, it was found that the husband's watch was missing, which added to the confusion of the investigators. And what were the reasons that prevented the killer from killing the wife as well instead of locking her inside the closet? And it is also confusing that the killer stole only the husband's watch and did not steal any of the valuables inside the palace. The police interrogated the neighboring residents, and through the interrogation, they informed them that the couple are in constant disagreement, and every day they hear the sound of their screams and their sharp argument, and their screams on the night of the crime were louder than usual. Sophie could be the killer, but it is not logical for her to kill her husband while she is locked inside the closet. The investigators were puzzled about the crime and decided to search and investigate extensively, and started from the first day the couple were brought together and how they got to know each other. It turned out that the wife had moved in the past to the area where the husband lived, and they got to know each other and got married. Of course, the husband was one of the very successful and wealthy businessmen and owned a lot of factories and companies, and he has countless money, but at the same time he was addicted to drinking alcohol and had a very difficult mood. The police suspected that there was a third party in the matter and that it was possible that there was a lover of the wife who did this act, but from the confessions of the close neighbors that they did not notice the presence of a stranger visiting her, the police left the wife and the case open until there is any evidence of the crime that enables her to know the truth. After these events are over, Sophie decides to move out of the house where her husband, John, was murdered and live in a new home. At that time, the wife began to feel bored because her beloved Tom was busy with his many works, and for this reason she began to search for another friend for her, and indeed she met a new young man named William, and a relationship developed between them, and the two mistresses met together without one of them knowing about the other. Of course, Sophie was under secret surveillance, and one of the investigators in the case of her ex-husband's murder was not convinced of her innocence in the case and that she is the party to the thread in the case. Therefore, this investigator, after noticing the strength of her relationship with Tom, decided to go to him, and without his prior knowledge, he entered his office and sat down to discuss with him. The investigator noticed that Tom owns a watch that matches the specifications of the watch that was lost from the crime scene, and he asked him about it. Tom told him that this watch was given to him by Sophie, and that he knew that the watch was registered with you as missing from the crime scene, but the truth is that after you left the place, Sophie found it by chance under one of the pillows placed on the sofa, gave it to me, and I may have forgotten to inform you of that. The investigator was not convinced of this, and suspicion began to hang over Tom that he might be the killer. Immediately, the investigator went to Sophie and asked her about the watch, and she told him that she had found it by chance, but she forgot to tell them, or she thought that the issue was not so important. Doubt increased inside the heart of the investigator, and he decided to publication of the case in the daily newspapers to stir up public opinion and perhaps enable him to find evidence to solve this case. William, Sophie's last friend, came to the investigator and informed him that a short while ago, Sophie asked him to get rid of a firearm that she owned. At the same time, one of Sophie's old friends came and informed the investigator that she had brought him a firearm and asked him to bury it inside the garden of his house before leaving her house, and immediately the police arrested Sophie and asked her about the firearms that she owned. Sophie admitted that she had these weapons and that she no longer needed them, so she gave them to her friends only, despite pressure from the investigators on Sophie to admit that she is the killer. The police had to release her because the investigators were unable to obtain a clear confession from her, and the case was closed at the time. 7 years later, business manager Tom called the police, telling them that he had other new confessions about the old case, and that there was another person sitting with him who had good knowledge of the events of the crime and would tell you exactly what happened at the time of the crime. In record time, the police came to Tom's office, and when they entered Tom's office, they found someone they had not seen previously. He sat in front of Tom and started talking about the crime, and it was as follows. It became clear to the investigators that this strange person, named Luca, was one of the maintenance engineers who entered a factory owned by the victim, and his story began about 10 years before the crime occurred. Luca says, one day Sophie called her husband and told him that the machine in the house had broken down and that he had to send a maintenance engineer to fix it. Sophie was dressed in her best clothes and was waiting for my arrival, and from that time my love affair with her began, and we used to meet secretly in a hotel. As time went by, things got a little tricky, and we decided to meet each other at her house while her husband was out. This is so that the neighbors do not notice my repeated entry and exit with her, and she made a secret room for me in the attic, and I actually moved to live with her in the same house and finished my work and settled in this situation and did not leave my room until John left the house, and we continued in this case until John began to notice a sound coming out of the attic, and Sophie was convincing him that the sound was an illusion and he heard it. But John decided to move out of the house because he was not comfortable with that, and I moved with them into the new house with the same plan and the same secret room. One night I was asleep in my room and woke up to the sound of John screaming at Sophie as he smashed things. Out of my fear and love for her, I walked out of my room and went downstairs. I grabbed 2 guns and fired 3 bullets at him, which was enough to kill him. Immediately Sophie started making a mess in the house and told me to shut the closet door on her and throw the key on the floor in the second room, and I did as she asked me, and after that immediately I went back to my room, and when Sophie was arrested at that time, she told Tom that he had to go home and feed her brother, which she would find inside a secret room in the attic. When Tom came to me and saw me, I collapsed in front of him, but he started to calm me down and told me that I should hide from sight and leave the house. And after 7 years had passed, Luca separated from Sophie and decided to confess to these events. Of course, they were all arrested on charges of murder and conspiracy, but due to the statute of limitations, all charges were dropped against them because the case had passed for more than 10 years. But the police were finally able to solve the mystery of a thorny case that was closed and forgotten.